Hello, and thank you for tuning into the show that goes across the continent to bring you stories near and far. I am Bukola Koka at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Channels Television brings you that story.
African leaders have been charged to unite and take decisive steps to address the various challenges confronting the continent. This was a recurring refrain from speakers at the opening ceremony of the 38th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the Union taking place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. President Bola Tinubu joined other African leaders, including former President Olusegun Obasanjo, at the ceremony, which took place at the headquarters of the African Union. Our State House correspondent, Lanre Lasisi, has more.
The Nelson Mandela Hall is filled as presidents, former presidents, ministers and heads of international agencies gather for the opening ceremony of the 38th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union. Taking place at the headquarters of the African Union in Addis Ababa, it is a chance to consider the state of the Union and the challenges confronting the continent. Welcoming everyone, the President of Ethiopia points out the need for decisiveness.
In a world marked by rapid change and multiple challenges, we find ourselves at the crossroads of uncertainty and opportunity. This moment calls upon us to strengthen our collective resolve, embrace resilience, and foster unity across Africa.
The United Nations Secretary General assures the Union of support in the push for critical reforms on the world stage.
Africa was under colonial domination when today's multilateral system was created, and that injustice endures. There is no excuse that Africa still lacks permanent representation in the 21st century. And we will keep pressing together for an international financial architecture that is no longer outdated, dysfunctional, and unfair. Correcting age-old injustices is essential to address here and now challenges.
Speakers highlight the need to ensure peace returns to the Republic of the Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. A passionate case was made for the theme of the year, Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations.
Let us remove the scars of history and be firm craftsmen of our fate, recognizing that the only people who can stop us now are we but ourselves. We have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery and to build the future that our people want of us and to give them that pride that is theirs. And we must do so in the spirit and with the results of ADWA.
The session also saw the new chairman of the African Union, the president of Angola, Joao Lourenço, take his seat, and Mahmoud Ali Yusuf was also elected as the new chairman of the African Union Commission. With the mounting challenges from within and from outside the continent, this summit presents the African Union with a unique opportunity to reassess and reform itself so as to be ready to meet the needs of the people of Africa. From the headquarters of the African Union here in Addis Ababa, Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
Now, from Addis Ababa to discuss unity and cooperation among African nations is a lawyer and political analyst, Mr. Kia Sigaye. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And let's start this way. How can African leaders balance their individual national interests with the need for unity and cooperation on continental issues, such that the talk shops that go on every year can be translated into tangible gains?
Okay, thank you. So Africa is geographically the second largest continent in the world, and it's also inhabited by the second largest population, which is 1.2 billion. And for this big continent, it requires visionary leadership in order to raise a number of challenges such as poverty, inequality, good governance and democracy, including political instability. Africa needs a visionary leader which will address this common challenge. So beyond the African states' borders, the African leaders must think and focus on the continental matters, including conflicts. So as part of the Agenda 2063, realizing integrated, peaceful, and secure Africa, the African leaders must work toward this goal. So the AU has a number of institutions, such as the African Union Commission, the Assembly, the Pan-African Parliament, and the Peace and Security Council, and the Court of Justice. Through these important institutions, the African leaders should work towards achieving this noble idea of having an integrated, peaceful, and prosperous Africa.
Interesting, and that leads us to the next part of the conversation. Do you think that African leaders are doing enough, coming up with enough strategies to address ongoing conflicts in regions like the Horn of Africa and even in West Africa, where there are real challenges of insurgency, banditry, unrest, and all of that constitute a limitation to the development of the entire continent?
Yeah, so Africa has been a victim of colonialism and neo-colonialism, and recently it has been victim of global geopolitical competitions. So some of the conflicts are originally from Africa, within Africa. Some of the causes of conflicts are outside of Africa due to global geopolitical competitions. So the African leaders should employ the African solutions to African problems. So the African Union has a standing decision-making powers through the Peace and Security Council, and there are also regional economic community mechanisms.
So when you say that African leaders should, at the African Union level, the Peace and Security Council should come up with African solutions, are you advocating, the return to the days where, its own security interventions, played active roles in helping to restore peace to war-torn countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone? I'm talking about the ECOMOGs of this world, rather than the interventions that is being provided by the United Nations, which has done little to ensure peace in war-torn, countries of the world like Sudan, and the other countries on the African continent, Somalia.
Yeah, absolutely. Africa is capable of addressing and resolving its own issues. Of course, there should be a global support. Of course, there might be a need for support and kind of assistance from global institutions. However, Africans are capable of resolving and addressing their issues through their own mechanisms. So there should be this confidence of building these strong institutions where African institutions, it could be the African Union, or it could be ECOSOC, or the East African Community, IGAD. There are a number of regional institutions or regional economic community agreements. And based on this, the Africans should really, rather than relying on external powers, we should really focus internally and try to build the capacity of continental and regional institutions so that we can resolve our own issues through our own mechanisms. It's really sad that the intra-Africa trade is very low, and most of the African states, they trade with countries out of this continent. And if there is, for instance, if there is a demand for a product from Ethiopia or Kenya, for instance, the enabling environment is to import it either from China or from European countries. Of course, there should be free international trade. However, the African countries should really focus on developing and strengthening an intra-Africa trade. And as part of that, in 2018, the African leaders have agreed to establish African Continental Free Trade Area.
What role can civil society and the media play in holding African leaders accountable for their actions in governance and indeed in the values, upholding the values of democracy? In promotion of accountability, democracy, and exposing corruption. So as you know, corruption has been and it is continuing to be one of the major challenges of the African continent. And in order to address these critical issues, in order to properly budget the public fund, there needs to be a very strong and independent civil society and the media. For instance, investigative journalism will play a crucial role in preventing and exposing corruption within the public governance. So these institutions, the media and the civil society play as watchdogs, because the public does not have that much power. Having these strong institutions, media and the civil society will be crucial in order to make the African leaders accountable for their actions. We must thank you very much. We've been talking with Mr. Kia Segai. He's a lawyer and political analyst who has joined us virtually from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Violence in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has forced many families to flee their homes, with many seeking refuge in places like neighboring Rwanda. As the humanitarian crisis worsens, East African leaders are urging immediate action to bring peace and stability to the region. Salem Solomon has this report on the impact that the conflict is having on civilians.
Gunshots echo through Goma, one of the largest cities in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as terrified civilians scramble for safety. The city and its surrounding regions are the latest epicenter of a conflict between the Congolese army and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group, although Kigali denies its support for the group. This increase in violence has displaced thousands of people and prompted urgent regional diplomatic efforts led by the current chair of the East African Community, Kenyan President William Ruto, to address the crisis.
And we are all in agreement that now more than ever, it is an existential issue, not just for the people of Eastern DRC, but for this region. The situation in Eastern DRC now demands our collective focus.
The conflict is part of a broader war in Eastern DRC, where more than 120 militants and armed groups operate, often competing for control of the area's rich mines. North Kivu province, a long-standing flashpoint, has seen a surge in fighting, forcing people like Lomu Biondo Manuel to flee repeatedly.
We face a lot of hardships. We want to go back to our original homes. We want peace.
Another woman fleeing Mugwanga, one of the largest camps for displaced people near Goma, says civilians are caught in the crossfire.
We have nothing to give to our children that we are running with. We are just fleeing with nothing. It's all in God's hands. All we can do is run.
The United Nations says more than 5.5 million people are displaced in the DRC, many of them in North Kivu. Humanitarian organizations warn that the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Aid delivery has been disrupted by blocking routes and increased violence, leaving many without basic needs, says Save the Children's country director Greg Brown.
This upsurge in fighting has killed children. Children have been caught up in it, killed through explosions. In addition, hundreds of thousands, 200,000 children displaced from where they're living, some displaced for a second and third time.
Humanitarian agencies say the needs far outweigh the available resources, and displacement isn't the only issue that children, women, and girls face in displacement camps, Ram says.
Sexual violence against women, girls, children is a serious problem. Rape is a weapon of war. Displaced people's camps can be terribly unsafe places. The numbers are overwhelming. And for each person we can help, and that the rest of the humanitarian community can help, we know that there are tens of others who are not getting the assistance they need today.
Despite calls for the UN and East African leaders for a ceasefire, the violence continues, leaving millions in limbo. Salim Solomon, VOA News.
Farmers in Cameroon are facing a rise in theft of their cocoa produce. At the Mbam-Etkim region, the farmers are raising the alarm and calling on authorities to take action as rising cocoa prices, driven by a global shortage, have led to a surge in theft.
In the village of Intui, farmers harvesting cocoa beans at a local plantation are placing amulets on trees, hoping to cast a spell on thieves trying to steal their produce and drive them away from their farm. Cocoa producer Akolo Nogo Emmanuel says the recent spike in theft is unprecedented, claiming local police are not doing enough to deter would-be criminals. Emmanuel says he's never seen anything like it.
Theft has become so recurrent, we've never seen anything like it before. It's really very serious, to the point where you're being robbed night and day. We're experiencing losses, and that's creating problems in terms of paying the workers in the fields.
Farmer Emmanuel also complains of a problem with the police when the thieves are caught.
We have a problem with the police. For example, when we catch thieves and take them to the police, after a day or two, they end up back on the streets because you see the same person again in the village. That's discouraging.
The cocoa farmer now calls on fellow producers to not give up in protecting their crops. According to local reports, the surge in prices in Cameroon stems from adverse weather conditions and plant diseases at plantations in cocoa-growing powerhouses such as Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. Meanwhile, crops in the country have reportedly tripled over the past year as buyers look to its deregulated economy to meet growing global demand.
A Kenyan company is using the age-old art of glass blowing to recycle waste into sculptures, goblets, beads, and more. Juma Majanga reports from Kajiado, Kenya.
At Kitengela Hot Glass on the edge of Nairobi National Park, James Gashuki and other artisans are busy recycling glass waste into these colorful products using the traditional art of glass blowing.
We have wine glasses, we have tumblers, we have assorted vases, we have jugs, we have sculptures also, and for custom items we have dolls, which we use in making the furnitures and the panels.
Glass constitutes 2% of the country's waste, according to Kenya's National Environment Management Authority. Kitengela Hot Glass owner Anselm Cruz says the company recycles about half a ton of glass per day and more than 4,200 tons since it was founded over 3 decades ago.
Our mission was to place glass on the craft map of Kenya, and now we're working on doing that further afield.
The process begins with the collection of scrap glass, which is then sorted by color, cleaned, and left to dry. The dried glass is fed into a furnace and left to melt overnight at nearly 1,200 degrees Celsius.
In the morning we have a big bath of molten glass that's like a bowl of soup, and from that we will gather and pull out the glass that we need, and the same honey principle, if you stick a spoon into honey and turn it and it pulls out a bit of honey, that's exactly what we're doing with the glass, except hotter and bigger. Then when you have that lump of stuff on the end of your blowpipe, that's when you start shaping and tooling and pulling and controlling it into whatever the object is that you want to make.
The results are these glittering glass products that attract local and international clients. South African-based Kenyan sculptor Stanislaw Trebinski has exhibited in the United States and elsewhere. He worked with Kitengela artisans on pieces for a new exhibition.
I mean, I think it allows people access to a very high-end product at a very affordable price. I mean, if you understand what goes into it. I certainly have benefited greatly from it.
And Kitengela Hot Glass says the environment benefits as they turn waste into something beautiful. Juma Majanga, VOA News, Kajiado, Kenya.
In Kenya, the old school meets new power, with a Kenyan engineer revolutionizing classic cars with his homegrown innovations. He is also turning the vehicles into eco-friendly machines in Nairobi.
A Kenyan engineer is giving vintage cars a powerful makeover using his innovative fuel injection technology to turn classic vehicles into high-performance, eco-friendly machines in Nairobi. In his car workshop, Peter Imberia is repairing the vehicles with modern and vintage cars, along with motorbikes parked by the repair center awaiting upgrades.
What happened is my first machine or my first vehicle was a Mercedes-Benz W201 to be very specific, and came carbureted, okay? So I tinkered with the carburetor for over 3 years. Like I got to the point where I could no longer tune it. Like for fuel economy, I was getting the best. For performance, I was getting the best. But with the carburetor, you can't get best of both worlds.
Driven by the engine's robust build, he sought a more efficient solution and designed a custom control system to optimize fuel delivery.
I didn't want to change the engine. I didn't want to swap it. So I thought, now that I'm able to design my own boards, my own machines, okay? What if I make a control system to control the engine? Now the engine control system, okay? And that's where I began. I bought a dummy engine, or rather a guinea pig engine, fully functional, just the whole engine plus the exhaust pipe, and I began tinkering with it.
Imberia made a computerized system that monitors engine parameters in real time, unlike the old carburetors that rely on mechanical parts that are poor when it comes to compensating acceleration and fuel economy. Underscoring that instead of simply selling an electronic control unit, he provides kits with remote support, enabling car enthusiasts worldwide to upgrade their vehicles without requiring deep mechanical expertise.
I'm selling you the kit and offer remote support that you can just get the kit, you can install it on your own, you don't have to have heavy mechanical background. We'll guide you remotely until the point the vehicle runs and runs very well. Remotely.
According to Imberia, his systems significantly lower emissions, although it never goes to zero, but reduces greatly to modern standards, highlighting that a 1967 Mercedes-Benz can achieve emission levels comparable to a 2025 model. However, the engineer encounters skepticism from the market, where the adoption and acceptance of local innovations are often undervalued.
I wouldn't say the main challenge is the mechanical bit. The main challenge is the adoption and the acceptance in the market. Maybe they'll be like, it's not reliable, it's supposed to be very cheap, you get. Proving them wrong, it's a hard task because now it takes time for them to see the vehicle is still on the road, still running, still performing best, for them to be like, oh, maybe the system is reliable now.
He admits proving them wrong is a hard task, noting that customers demand long-term proof of their vehicle's performance.
Well, that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. The Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I am Bukola Koka. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.